There's a mountain near where I live. It's a beautiful place. The only thing you can see from up there are the trees, the river, the bridge across the river, old quarries and hills. One thing you cannot see is my town, save for the church's bell tower sticking up out of the trees, white in a sea of green. You would never know a town was there were it not for the church's spire. You can't see people at all, of course. You can hear the bell in the church, even from up on that mountaintop. You can hear it as it rings on the hour, counting the time slowly, methodically. I'm alone in the world when I'm up there. My world. There is such beauty in silence, I find. From high on top of that mountain, there is no hint of the lives lived in that little town below. There is no plague on that mountaintop. There is plague in my little town. The plague lives there, down amongst those trees, way down below. In me. The plague lives in me. And yet here I am. Others have not fared so well. They have no one but themselves to blame. Before I became infected, I would go about my life as other people did. I would go to shops for food and wine. I would sit on my porch on warm summer nights and watch the people go by. We might exchange greetings, a verbal embrace, if you will, a recognition that we are alive in the world together. These people, by and large, did not wear masks. Despite warnings to the contrary, very few people in my village wore masks. Though this infuriated me, I usually kept it to myself, but sometimes I couldn't help myself. There is, after all, a plague stalking us, every one of us. Wear a mask, I implored them, for the love of, for themselves, their loved ones, their neighbors, for me. I have been told to fuck myself. I've been told to mind my own business. To that I say, if you aren't wearing a mask in the face of a plague that is unlike anything we have known in at least 100 years, and if wearing a mask can reduce the spread of this disease, maybe it is my business when others don't wear a mask. If you wearing a mask can save my life and is very much my business, it's very simple, really. Despite all my precautions, I became infected. No symptoms, but when tested, there it was. You wouldn't have known I was infected had I not told you. I could walk among you and you would never know that death walked with me. With a maskless breath, I could change lives forever or end them. More than ever, I saw wearing a mask as a responsibility, and I took it very seriously until I was pushed too far. One evening I went for a walk. I took every precaution, mask, gloves, maintained my distance. A rough, maskless young man bumped into me just outside the pharmacy. I hadn't seen him coming. I stood back to let him pass. I even motioned with my arm that he should go first. He just stood and looked at me with utter contempt. You look pretty weird with that mask on. Well, you got nothing to say to that motherfucker? Normally I would have shrugged this off and kept walking. But something about this young man provoked something in me. Instead of arguing with him or responding in kind, I removed my mask. There. Are you happy? I do have a secret to tell you, though. I approached him and leaned toward him so close I could smell the alcohol on his breath. I have the plague. With that, I gave him a pat on the back and left him standing there. I continued on my way, putting my mask back on as I did. The young man regained his senses, and before he entered the pharmacy, I heard a heartfelt motherfucker that was drowned out by the church's bell as it struck the hour. A few days later, in the pre-dawn hours this time, I walked by the pharmacy again. There was a sign on the door, closed until further notice. I came to find there had been a sudden outbreak of the plague among the store employees and some of the customers. Closed until further notice. Was it me? Or surely that young man bears as much of the blame as I. No way of knowing for certain, I suppose, but he was in that store unmasked and now closed until further notice. After reading the sign, I turned to go, and who should I find on the sidewalk but the young man I had encountered the week before. He looked haunted, emaciated. He had a racking cough. Motherfucker, you give me this, and all them other people too. No, I gave it to you if I gave it to anyone. You did the rest. What's your name, motherfucker? For the briefest instant, I wanted to look him in the eye and say death, but I thought better of it. Motherfucker will do. I turned to walk away, leaving him babbling in my wake, ending with one more expletive. Mother! I turned and saw him sprawled on the sidewalk, neither moving nor breathing. I looked at his body there on the sidewalk. Strangely, I felt no guilt. Had he worn a mask, none of this would have happened. Was it power that I felt looking at his lifeless body there on the sidewalk? Possibly. To put it perhaps more poetically, I am the breath that blows out the candle. I am the whisper that says, I have come for you. I am death by any other name. And with that realization came clarity. I knew what I had to do. As the majority of people in my village still refused to wear masks, even as people among them got sick and died, I would have to show them the way, expose their folly, and in doing so, save a diligent few. Life or death. It was for me to decide. So I rented a hall in town and invited everyone to a party to celebrate life in this dark time. No masks required. In fact, no masks allowed. I called it a mask, MASQUE, to give it a little flair. I made sure all the windows and doors were sealed tightly. I adjusted the ventilation to limit air circulation. No one who came wore a mask. For this one event, even I was maskless. I welcomed people as they entered, each and every one, and I walked among them, shaking hands, giving pecks on the cheek, laughing at their jokes. Within a week of my party, I could see the results. Fewer people, more of them coughing, looking unwell. Within 2 weeks, my little town was empty. Even the few who had diligently worn masks had not dared to attend my mask were nowhere to be seen. So, I'm alone. No one walks the streets as before. The traffic lights still methodically change from green to yellow to red with no traffic to heed them. I listen for voices that speak no more, the tread of shoes on the sidewalk, laughter, the car horn of an impatient driver, but all is quiet, save for the wind in the trees, the birds with their timeless songs, squirrels jumping from tree to tree to tree. The church bell still rings on the hour, the number of rings marking the passing of time. You can hear it from the mountaintop. Oh, I still go there often. When I'm up there looking down on the sea of trees, I can imagine other people down there among them still. Nothing has changed on that mountaintop. Everything has changed down below. Everything, that is, except me. I am alone now, very much alone. That much has changed. I live in my solitude much as I lived before. Yes, there is beauty in silence, and silence is everywhere, here, especially here. But if you come to my town, you had better be wearing a mask.